Hello everybody. Hi, Brendan Kenny here. Come on in, come on in, come on in, all of you. And as you come in, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this if you're new or need to be reminded. My name is Brendan Kenny. I'm a lawyer in the Twin Cities, live in Shakopee, work in Minneapolis, and I'm on Twitter at KENNYBRENDAN. KENNYBRENDAN. And thank you for so many people who've been following me on Twitter. It's a lot of fun. It's really interesting, and I really look forward to this every week. And your response is so huge. Thank you for the hearts. For you who are new, the hearts are just a way of saying that you like what's being said or approve or something like that. It has nothing to do with anything romantic or anything like that, so nothing's going to be taken the wrong way. And you swipe left or right, one or the other allows you to share that you're watching this on Twitter, so people who follow you on Twitter can see that, maybe want to watch it as well. Same as Facebook and I think some other social media. You can also send emails as well. So how's everyone doing tonight? Oh, someone's saying something. Anyway, how is everyone doing tonight? Doing well? You know, Bob Ruff always talks about this being a movement, that we're part of a movement. And so let's have people check in terms of where you're coming from. So where are we listening? Someone's first Periscope. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm doing great. So where are we listening from? Do we have anyone in Twin Cities? Boston, LA, Northern California, New York City, Georgia, Cleveland, Memphis, San Diego, Kentucky, South Carolina, Connecticut, Houston, Washington. Wow. Just to speak of Memphis, one of my favorite songs is that Mark Kahn song, Walking in Memphis. So I always think of about that song, if you've heard it, about going to seeing the ghost of Alibis. And I think that's Mississippi. Oh, we got Sydney. Hey, Sydney. So it's a movement. We're a movement. Let's embrace it. We're a movement. And this episode of Truth and Justice Pod was another aspect of that movement. So let's keep it going. So what is this? What are we going to talk about? So for any of you who are new, I want a reminder, Periscope does allow people to make comments and have questions. I found it most helpful, Alabama, and many of you as well, that I kind of address the questions at the end. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Like tonight, I haven't even had time to prepare the questions I didn't answer last time. And thank you for sharing that. Anyone who wants to share, I think it's swipe left or swipe right. You push Twitter or Facebook or something like that and you share. And thank you for the hearts. That's the currency on Periscope. So it obviously, I'm a kind of words of affirmation guy, so it's great for me, and also it's what leads more people to listen. The likes. And I can tell my wife, hey, I had 1,000 likes last night, or hearts, and she thinks, well, maybe it's not all a waste of time. Anyway, just like Bob was saying about people saying how much they appreciate it. So behind me you'll see some notes, which as this goes forward might, be a reason why. And I want you to know, first of all, I was at Walmart last night. It was about at midnight, and I bought a selfie stick, which you're seeing right now. It was $5, clearly marketed at teenage girls. And I thought, I just want to let you know, like that scene in My Cousin Vinny where he's wearing that ridiculous suit and he says to the judge, I'm doing this for you. So I'm doing this for you to try to make this work better and this be a better experience for everybody. So that's why I have a selfie stick. It was good, as we might say in Catholic circles, a good mortification that, my pride and whatever, I could say I'm just going to buy a selfie stick and use it, even though I've judged people who've done the same. All right, so what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about the episode, but we're going to step back a bit. Robbie made a comment on Twitter about some of the stuff that people are talking about. We might talk about the episode, saying, you might not want to cover it because it's going to be talked about in Undisclosed. I don't think there's any danger of there being an overlap because, again, we're going to step back a bit into structure, storytelling, and myth. So what do I mean by that? First of all, to give you, I'm gonna move right to the myth part or the story to set the stage. There's something incredible that happens when storytelling happens. It requires a storyteller and it requires an audience. And so I'm going to tell a quick story, a true story. In 1943, on a U.S. Navy vessel going through the Atlantic to Great Britain from the United States, there was thousands of people on board, and there were 4 chaplains. There was a Catholic priest, there was a rabbi, and there were two Protestant chaplains. And they had an especially good working relationship, got along really well with the sailors and along well with each other. Well, something happened. Someone says, when does truth and justice come into it? We're going there. Something happened, and the thing that happened was that the ship got hit by a U-boat torpedo, and they're going down, and because the chaplains were in on the know more with the captain, they knew that the ship was going to go down, and anyone who didn't have a life vest or was in a lifeboat was going to die. So they helped everyone get in their life vests and get on the lifeboats, and there weren't any left. They were there. They didn't have life vests. They were going to a certain death, and they locked arms. And wow, I've got people who are trolling me. This is exciting. They locked arms and they recited the Psalms from the Old Testament together, which was their common background. And you had some in Latin, right? Some were saying in Latin and English and also Hebrew. And so at least I hear that story, and that shows me that. What was I going to say? That you hear that story and it's evocative. It creates an atmosphere. It tells me something. It puts me in a certain place. So that's what I'm going to talk about here, stepping way back. What place the detectives and the lawyers in this case were, and ultimately the jury that led them to convict Adnan Syed. So what is a myth? What is the difference between myth and something else? I got to move and get a book. It's going to tell you. It's not John Cardinal Henry Newman. It is a book I love a lot from Love in the Western World. And in Love in the Western World, it says this, to talk about myth versus everything else. It says, therefore, a work of art, whether poem, tale, or novel, differs radically from a myth. The validity of a work of art depends on nothing but the talent of its author. What matters about it is exactly what does not matter as regards a myth, its beauty, together with all its qualities of singular success, such as originality, style, skill, etc. And this is in italics, right? So it's important. But the most profound characteristic of a myth is the power which it wins over us, usually without our knowing. If a story, an event, or some leading human figure may turn into a myth, it is precisely by virtue of coming to hold sway over us as though against our will. A work of art as such never exerts, properly speaking, any compulsion upon its spectators or auditors. However splendid and powerful it may be, it is always open to criticism and can always be enjoyed on individual grounds. With a myth it is otherwise. The statement of a myth disarms all criticism, and reason, if not silence, becomes at least ineffective. We've talked about, Bob has and others, about people who, I think fairly says, in ignorance, are utterly convinced that Adnan Syed is 100% guilty. I think these people are a separate case than who I'm talking about. So when we're talking about the detectives in the case and the prosecutors and maybe even the lawyers on the defense side, I want to examine how it's... someone says it's a command board. It is a command board I have behind me. How that plays in everything. So, and I'm going to try, I know you guys are making comments, I get distracted, and I'll try to address it at the end. It works better all around. So, what happened in this case? We know that there was a narrative that ultimately became the narrative at trial that was persuasive to a jury. And that narrative was this. I'm going to play it right now from Serial, or at least part of the narrative. I think it's helpful right here. All right, we got the one from Serial that is at the very beginning of the case that I like a lot, that Sarah Koenig had right here. I have the little clip here where she starts at the beginning, and I'd suggest that it could be that this narrative was important for all of us, and the myth that kind of came out influenced how maybe we listened to Serial. And again, I'm saying those who did not know Adnan Syed family and the rest of us who just got involved and got interested in the case. So here it is. It's taken a little bit of time. Someone in from San Antonio. Hello, San Antonio. And after this, I will...
Please just take a look at Adnan's case.
Oh, I'll hold it here.
I don't get emails like this every day, so I thought, sure, why not? I read a few newspaper clips about the case, looked up a few trial records, and on paper, the case was like a Shakespearean mashup. Young lovers from different worlds, thwarting their families, secret assignations, jealousy, suspicion, and honor besmirched. The villain, not a Moor exactly, but a Muslim all the same.
So that's at the very beginning. So that plays into it. And then we have the Muslim boyfriend who wasn't able to get through the breakup, who killed his girlfriend, put her in a trunk, bragged about it, and then went on as though nothing happened. I think that's in a summary form what the narrative was. So what I want to look at is where this come from, who came up with it, when, and how did it become the narrative. And after that, I'm going to talk about structure, specifically how important structure is in telling a story and understanding what happened. So, narrative and myth. What we're looking at. What's the narrative? Why do we have a myth? It really is, I think, partly when it operates in real life, a shortcut that allows me, without a whole lot of data evidence, to come up with a story that makes sense and not be in that middle place. So the reason for myth and the way it plays out in life. So do you remember when Sarah Koenig was talking to Deirdre, and Deirdre said, you just have to be in that place. You have to be in the place where maybe he did it, you're convinced he did it, the next day you're convinced he didn't do it, and you're going back and forth until you exhaust everything. And this, I think, is what a lot of us are doing. That's what Bob's done, a lot of other people. But that's very difficult. People use the term low information jurors or low information voters. I'd say maybe low passion as well. It's very difficult to do, and unlike us, the jurors weren't operating out of their own playbook. They were influenced by what was being said. And as Adnan pointed out on Serial, there wasn't a counter-narrative. Do you remember that scene where he says, the prosecution really put out a pretty big case, and on the other side, there were quibbles. I'm paraphrasing. It wasn't really a counter-narrative. So we have a jury that, as many of us would be inclined to do, tempted to do, jump to conclusions based on a story that makes sense, that maybe we already had, and a prosecution who knows that, and a defense that has no story. So I suggest that's what happened. So we have the narrative in the case, and the question is when. I think Bob makes a good point today, and Undisclosed has talked the same, that there was something that happened when the case went from missing person to murder, and we went from the Baltimore County Sheriff's Office to the Baltimore Police Department. And I would be interested to know in the caseloads between the two. So we go from OShea, Detective OShea, to McGillivray and Ritz. So that time is, I'm forgetting the exact time. I think, right around the time her body was discovered, which I'm forgetting, late February, if I'm wrong. Don't sue me. But in any event, that's when things change over. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking about, how did this narrative... Okay, February 9th. Thank you. Thank you! And I can't read your name, but I appreciate it. How did this narrative come to be? And thanks to some good folks on Reddit who will know who they are, hopefully, when I say this, if they did it, I found something very interesting. I found that Detective OShea had a case in 1997 that had some interesting similarities to this case. You can look it up in the Baltimore Sun or other places. It was called the Ann Holland case. That was the name of the woman. And in this case, very, very likable, wonderful woman. As if this was Dateline, as every episode they'd say that she lit up the room. Which I don't mean to be flippant, but that's one of those matters that something they say when someone dies. I don't know if you've ever heard about someone living. Oh yeah, she's great. She lights up a room. That's something that says when people die. In any event, this woman, her ex-husband, killed her apparently. That's a story, at least strangled her and put her in the trunk of a car. and it was found about 100 feet, I think, from his house. And she was strangled, and he was the ex. He was Muslim. She was a Muslim convert. Someone says he was a product of his environment. Well, here's the thing that I think is interesting. And I think Bob has a point. I'm not sure I completely am along the whole way. But he says that Detective OShea actually did a reasonably good investigation, but things changed when it went over to the Baltimore City Police Department, which may be true. And the thing about myth and narrative is it doesn't mean the person who originates it or plants the seed doesn't need to be the person who reaps, you know? So Detective OShea, and I'll say a little bit more of the story, if in passing or in a note that we don't have or talking to Detective McGillivray had told about this story and this could be a possible explanation for it, maybe Detective OShea didn't buy it. Maybe it wasn't even influencing him, but it influenced maybe Detective McGillivray. And that also could be what influenced the, I'm forgetting the name, the group that did, the consultant group that did the report that talked about the idea of an honor killing and that Hay was his property. And it could be that there were some elements of that in the 1997 case, and Haney, thank you. And it might have even been true. There were no eyewitnesses in this case, and it was circumstantial evidence. So when does a myth become powerful? When does it become powerful for us? And I think often it becomes powerful when we're in that place of not knowing what's going on, and seeking something as a shortcut that will get us to a story that makes sense. And thank you for all of you who are sharing this Periscope. I think it's to the left or the right. You can push Twitter, Facebook, or even send it as an email to anyone else who's interested. So that might be when we're interested in having the story. And the Muslim ex-husband. And how did that happen? So how did this story, if that's what it was, and it was there, how did it become part of this case? Here's, I think, a timeline that maybe makes sense. We have the tip on February 1st. And as other people have pointed out, and I think I talked about again, I saw more of a flurry of activity in response to the February 1st tip in the direction of Dawn than I did in the direction of Adnan. And what that means could be, as I've suggested, that you could have had a tip, whoever the tip came from, that did say, look at the boyfriend, like we have in Detective Massey's note, where he says, he does do the misspelling of Adnan Syed, whether inadvertently or on purpose, but he does say boyfriend, not ex-boyfriend. So the call could have been, look at the boyfriend, and that would have led Detective OShea to look at Dawn, and when he contacts the lens crafters and looks into it, he gets that timesheet, and he says, Dawn's out of it. And he says, well, there's really one other person in it, this Adnan guy. Well, then he has this memory of this case from 1997 that he's worked on. I think, maybe we've got something like that. And that gets shared, and you have the N Haney Report, and suddenly you have a story. And a story that sticks because it fits with something else that people know. That combined maybe with the Romeo and Juliet thing, or a dozen other stories. So that's what I would say is going on, might be going on here, and struck me from listening to the episode today. And what I mean when I said that this myth, this narrative I'm talking about is one that I'm applying to the detectives at the time and the lawyers at the time, and not those today, because I think what's going on among the people on Reddit and other places who are saying that that are saying that Adnan's guilty is something different. And I'm not sure what that is, but I think that myth and narrative does involve law enforcement essentially being blameless as a practical matter in cases, always being right. And I think that influences a lot of it. But I won't kind of go into that story right now. That's really the main thing I wanted to say about myth. And then I want to talk about structure. And someone pointed out, and I don't know if it was Adnan Syed Companion, because I know I've in contact with them, and we both share a love for the Kanban board. And the Kanban board is just a way of organizing information. Backlog, queue, to do, doing, done. You're seeing the to do, doing, done. And if you notice, there's this little thing up there, that's money, and it just gives the idea of creating an incentive for actually completing work when it's done. So all this is to say that structure matters. And I can, since some of these podcasts, like Bob's podcast, he's talked about working out and everything like that. So I will say this, that I recently implemented this system. I am by nature highly unorganized, which many of you could pick up on following these periscopes. I'm all over the place, and that's my personality. And when I do that, I have all the stuff that's on this board and on the columns here you don't see are already here. Someone's asking where I'm broadcasting from. Home, office. I'm in the basement of my house. So I have a Kanban board on the basement of my house and at the office. So things that can be handled at home, I handle here. And as a result, it allows me, because I have to do a lot of my work late at night, just based on family commitments, it allows me to be accountable for what I'm doing. So all the information, this raw data on here, was pretty much in my head or somewhere else on a notepad. But to have it in this system, in this form, is very different. And maybe that's why some people, I feel like, have missed the boat a bit talking about profiling, and specifically Jim Clemente's interview on Truth and Justice podcast. Because, yes, a lot of what he said is information we might already know. But the value of it is the structure. And if you talk to any script writer, and I only say because I follow any kind of artistic storytelling angles from other people, because they do a lot better job than lawyers, in my opinion. And so what I mean by that is that they think structure is really important. They think it really matters, the words that are used, how it's described, how the raw data is put out there. And so if they looked at this case, it would really matter to them how we're all looking at this and saying this. And I will respond to one comment. Someone said that it's heartbreaking that Adnan Syed is still in the suspect pool. Yes, I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it that way at all. If there's a benefit, people are laughing at me wearing a suit in the basement. Well, it's in the Midwest, so a basement is really a downstairs. It's not like I'm in, huddled in some dirty place, with rats scurrying around. But in any event, yes, the deal with Adnan being a suspect is it's an exercise that we're doing to try to find the answer we need. Someone asked if I wear a suit to bed. No, but pretty much. Thanks for the time. So we need this structure to get to where we're going. Just like if I'm having a philosophical argument with somebody, it would be important to define terms, and it would be important to get to all these preliminaries, cut off as many areas of ambiguity as possible, so that we can not be distracted from other things. And so I think that's what's happening. There's a real benefit. There's a real benefit of making stipulations, you might say, to the other side. It first of all builds a sense of credibility with people listening and watching, and also allows us to focus on what it is we really care about. So, and the limits, let me put it this way, the limits of what we're arguing about. What I mean by that is, if we profile this case, and I said I wouldn't use the term, but investigate the case in the way that Jim Clemente did, we have to acknowledge that in any world, pretty much whoever Adnan Syed was, whatever his last name was, as the ex-boyfriend, he would be one of the focuses. And so we don't need to think that he should have never been looked at by anybody. So that's good. That's a good point to have. And I think that point allows us to maybe look at the Baltimore County Sheriff's Office investigation a bit differently than the Baltimore City investigation. So we can do that. We can see the limits of what we're arguing with and the points that the other side is making, and maybe, you know, find some common ground or at least build some credibility, and then see what the key areas are. So if we're talking about a timeline, which I think we are, we want to know where things went awry. And again, as my former governor would say, Jesse Ventura, he pronounced it awry. You know, where things went awry. And it seems like the most likely place that things went awry was when things got turned over to the Baltimore City Police Department. That's really what I have to say today. I don't want to get too much into the episode beyond that, because I think it was just a great episode, and Bob provided a structure that laid out what we are concerned about, that we want to have a suspect and try to determine if there's an alibi, rule somebody out, and then go from there. And what might have made the difference was this false timesheet, and that allowed essentially the wrong person be ruled out and the wrong person to stay ruled in. And so that might be the key moment. So that's all I wanted to talk about. Let's get to some question and answers. There's been tons of comments, and thank you for all the hearts, lots of comments about Dawn, you know, what's going on with that investigation, and I agree that we shouldn't get ahead of it, but things are moving in that direction. A lot's been done already, and a lot's being done. And I think most of us can agree that at this point we're in now, Dawn is certainly still ruled in. And it does feel odd to be on here talking about someone who does exist and what's going on in their lives. And so I think it's important that we do not come to any harsh conclusions. What do you think about Clemente looking at Jay? Someone said he isn't. Well, he wouldn't have looked at Jay for the purpose of this initial consult that he did, because Jay figures nowhere in the scene. You know, it's only from his testimony. Otherwise, he wouldn't really show up. So Bob said something about the DNA and what he'd be talking about. I really don't know for sure what is going on with the DNA. It has implications for the defense, and that's something we should think about as we stand here, that there are parallel but not identical tracks going on right here. There is the effort to get Adnan Syed released, shown innocent, however that happens, and the one to find out who really killed Hae-Min Lee. So that means that there's going to be different things going on, and at this point, I should say, I don't think it's really made sense for the non-Syed defense team to get the DNA, because it's not that there's a fear of the results, and that is what Adnan Syed himself said. You may remember he said he has nothing to fear in this case. It's just that you don't know what the state is going to do with it. And someone says about what sort of DNA we're talking about. We had the liquor bottle near the body that had untested DNA. Remember when we first heard about the scene and we heard Sarah Koenig way back talk about what was there? There was the liquor bottle, there was them things, and the problem of determining what is going on and what belongs there. Someone says fingernail clippings. So there's a number of different things that weren't tested, and we don't know to what degree they're still available and where they are. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And someone says looking at suspects like Jay isn't what Clemente does. And I'll just say there's a question. I think that's true because Clemente is taking a case, a difficult to solve case, and stepping back again in structure and figuring out what might have been missed. If you've ever seen that case, I think that show Cold Case, is that that is one where they look at a case anew and try to find something. Someone says, I'm concerned about ability to get new evidence of anything now. Thoughts? I don't know what the state can get. There's two separate questions. One, what evidence can the state get? And what evidence can the defense get? And there's certainly a difficulty with the state getting new evidence, and there's a difficulty with the defense, more so with the state, because the state put everything on the table last time. I really agree with Susan Simpson's point that as almost like a Murphy's Law sort of thing, that if there was a piece of evidence that could have been used in the first two trials by the state, they would have been used. So we really have nothing to fear from anything new in that sense. But there's a lot that from the defense side that wasn't offered in the beginning and could still. I will say about the Mr. S thing, and I don't think we're storifying about who might have been involved, but we do know that Mr. S, well, we don't know this for sure, I should say. Let me back up. We know, you and I all know, even just from Serial, that Jay Wilds, starting in late January, worked at an adult bookstore. And really, adult bookstore is probably a nicer term than should be used. It was a really bad place, as many of them are, and probably worse than some. There was a lot of criminal activity going on. Who knows why Jay was working there, whether it was just for the income or whether there was some side income through pot or something like that. I don't think I'm saying anything terrible about him to say that. That would just be the obvious implication to me. And one could hear a lot of things going on there. Something could have been noticed, and someone could have been talking about it, something that they saw change. Someone talks about, and so what I mean by that is Jay could have heard something, and that could have touched upon, if he was the tipster, his February 1st call. And it could have been connected with something he heard about Dawn, or something he heard about Dawn, or something someone saw about Hay and didn't connect with the body. I will say this. I will just pause the theory, because I think psychological forensics is really important here. And we've talked about, many of us, the problem about Jay. What's the deal with Jay? When is he telling the truth? And that's very hard. But one thing I think we've been able to determine about Jay is something about how he views himself through other people and through himself. And you might remember in the Intercept interview that he expressed sadness that he hadn't been able to protect Haymon Lee. And you might remember in the interview that Bob had with Laura that she said about how protective Jay was. And we can go all about maybe ways he wasn't protective, whatever. But I'm saying that seemed to be a key part of his character, that he was someone who was good to his friends and protected people. The criminal element of Woodlawn, but not a guy that was dangerous to people who didn't deserve it. So what could that tell us? I thought earlier about, just again, not to storify about Dawn, but let's just play this all out without getting into detail about Dawn. Oh, I'll just respond to this before I get into Dawn. And Rabia said Clemente did work as a prosecutor's detective, and he's done a lot of stuff. If you look up online on YouTube, he was involved in the Boston sniper case. He was also had a lot of interesting things to say about the John Benet Ramsey case. So he's a very smart guy, and I think even those of us who might think that law enforcement overstate what profiling can do, if there's someone in there that can do whatever it is they do well, it's Jim Clemente. So Jay, He wants to protect people. He sees himself in that way. He doesn't see himself as a dangerous guy or a sketchy guy or someone who harms people. DC sniper, I'm sorry, you're right, who harms people. And so let's back up and let's think about how people responded to Hae Min Lee's disappearance. Underwhelming response. All of us can agree from everything we can see. They thought maybe she ran off with Dawn. They thought a lot of things. What if Jay's reaction was different? What if Jay, seeing himself as street smart and the criminal element of Woodlawn who knew what was up, unlike these magnet school people, what if he thought there's something really bad going on here? I don't know what it is, but none of these tools, no offense, in the magnet program are going to find it, and the cops aren't going to find it. Remember in the interview he says that, you know, his house could be on fire. He could be getting shot at. He's not going to call the cops. So I think it's fair to say we know that as part of his character, understandably, given where he's from, that he wasn't exactly pro-cop. So what if, like the rest of us, he was doing his own investigation at the time. And he was looking around, he was listening around. And I'm not going to go so far as to say that he went to work at the, I forget exactly when he went to work at the adult bookstore. Well, it was before Hae Min Lee's body. I'm not going to say that he went to work at the adult bookstore to find out that Hae Min Lee was the guy. But again, and I'm not trying to sympathize. I'm just trying to suggest something that could have happened. So he thinks something's really wrong, and he does his investigation, and it could be, again, if we assume he made the February 1st call, let's just say that maybe, and he said watch for the for the boyfriend. He could have suspected Dawn. We don't know any evidence of him meeting Dawn, but let's just keep in mind the world we're talking about here. We're talking about a world of how many people were there in the magnet program? 30. Jay was not, but he was Stephanie's boyfriend. And he would have heard something, presumably, about Dawn. And I might be totally wrong. I'm just making suggestions. He might have heard something about Dawn. And I want you to ask yourself, from what we know about Dawn, not being the blonde-haired surfer boy, Camaro driver, like someone like that, dreamy, most of us would call, but someone else entirely, let's say emo. I'm going to go back to my pet theory. I do not think he'd be the kind of guy that would really like Dawn. So I don't know. I don't know where that all fits in, but I just offer that to say that, some of this internal investigation into the mind of other people can pay dividends, even if we don't believe anything that comes out of their mouth. If we can gauge maybe what their emotions are, and I think we can relatively well, versus what they say, we can know. I think I'm going to leave it at that. That's just some of my thoughts. So let's see what else we say. Say something strange about Stephanie. Stephanie would be someone I think we'd all want to hear about, and but we haven't. So yeah, someone says strangulation is a crime of passion. Yes, it is, and that I always struggled with the strangulation part. At the very beginning, I struggled with it non, even when I didn't see anything about it, know anything about it. I thought, well, it doesn't make any sense for first-degree murder at all, that he's going to plan on getting into the car and then, strangling her. And someone said the killer knocked her unconscious. That could have been a mistake and whatever, and I certainly buy that. Gosh, I hate talking about this, but that, strangling someone, I guess, if they're knocked out is one way. I guess it's better than strangling someone when they're awake, but gosh, what a terrible thing. What a terrible thing. And at least if that was the case, at least the end didn't have to be maybe so bad for Hae, which is something. And that's the thing someone's saying about her being on the phone, Hay being on the phone with Dawn until 3 a.m. It might be that this time sheet was the difference. You know, there's always a turning point in life. There's a change, and it's hard to pinpoint that turning point in life. And no way this happened at Best Buy, right? And the turning point comes, well, when it turns. And this could be what I would call maybe the but-for cause versus proximate cause. And just what I mean by that is that but-for cause is a term that's used in law to mean if something hadn't happened, you wouldn't have had the result. So it could be that I think it's likely that if this timesheet hadn't been fabricated, the case would have gone differently, at least for Adnan. At least he wouldn't have been ended up where he was if it hadn't been for the fraudulent timesheet. Serial missed so much. How? Well, again, I think structure. Serial had a different task than Undisclosed and the Truth and Justice Pod. And if we talk about a myth or a narrative, none of us had that narrative. Again, other than people who knew the case and knew the family, none of us had that narrative. So I would just offer that if Undisclosed came on and did what they're doing now without Serial as a foundation, I think it would be a lot more difficult. They'd have to establish their own narrative, and that would be a lot of work. And as a result, they could have gone farther. Were Hay and Dawn intimate? We know from the trial transcripts that he said at trial that they were. We don't know exactly when, but presumably, well, he said they were, and that tells us what we know. Again, keep in mind the time frame that we've got from January 1st officially going out, Hay and Dawn, to January 12th. All right. Let's see, is there anything else people want? Well, I will tell you that tomorrow, any news since Justin dropped the latest reply brief, I have not heard anything new. I know Undisclosed has some bombshells, not this week, but next week, I think is when it is. They're going to have some bombshells. Colin's going to have some bombshells about Cristina Gutierrez, and I'm not sure what's going to happen this week. The state can't really respond, and I don't think really has any interest in responding to the reply brief, because it's a reply brief, and unless they do a surreply, they're not going to do it. I don't think they have any interest in it. Do you think the state will retry? No. I agree with Colin that I'm not speaking as an expert, but I don't know what they retry with. So I don't see it happening if it gets to that point that there would be a retrial. I don't see them doing it. But they'll delay this and do all those things. All right. Yeah. Thank you for listening. It's great that people value this, and I'm going to keep doing it. And I will say I will be on tomorrow night talking about the Undisclosed episode that's dropping tomorrow. And I'll be on at 10 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel. And I'm going to have a very important announcement that I think you guys are really going to like. I'm very excited about it. I think you're going to enjoy it. And so there will be an announcement. It will be before the question and answer period, because I don't think it's fair to make people wait till the end of the question and answer period. There will be an announcement, and so you just wait till the end of the official part of this Periscope. Bye. And just to answer a few more questions, anyone who's still on, I'll try to post to YouTube. I will post a catch, and I will send links through Twitter and through Catch, and you can watch an archive version, but I've had a ton of trouble uploading to YouTube, so that's the only reason the recent ones haven't been there. There was some other question that people asked, but I don't remember it, so I'm going to sign out. I have more work to do, as you can see from the Kanban board, and good night.